Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, folks. It's Dan here with a review and analysis for the next episode of RWBY with episode 3, A Minor Hiccup. So far, the volume has been hitting some pretty strong home runs with its episodes, and now we're set to see the girls split off and acting on what to do with the incoming threat. So, does the volume strike a hat trick of top quality episodes, or does it lose some balance? Spoiler warning, of course, for the past and most recent episode, so keep that in mind, cause, RWBY is asking nicely. We open with a quick skit of Jean's continuing attempts to flirt with Weiss in one of Professor Port's lessons, but coming up to the same result as always. Dude's got a bad track record with flirting, almost about as bad as mine. It's a scene that, doesn't really play into the event of the episode, just to set up it's the day after, really. And more than likely will play more into Jean's events this volume than Team RWBY's. It could have easily not been in the episode, but it didn't do too much harm for me. From that, we get the RWBY girls getting geared up in their new attire for the plan. I'll quickly go into each of their designs now that we get a proper look at them, but I will say that besides the school uniform, I'm glad that the girls are actually getting more than one attire. It makes them seem more real. I mean, what are the chances of people having on the same clothes all the time? They easily might not keep them for the volume, but still, it's a nice touch. Time to scan over the get-ups then. Firstly, with RWBY, most of her new look comes from the top half of her rather than the bottom, as her tights and boots haven't really changed too much. She's got a dress that sort of resembles another girl in the series, wink wink, but a grey upper top and black overall skirt combo with a red frill at the bottom for her emblem. It fits her quite well in terms of its cuteness feel. It doesn't really make her stand out, which, again, kind of also fits her. Though I gotta ask, what's that thingy on her shoulder? It looks like part of the armor that the guys in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep used to transform into their full armor mode. Weiss has gone for a full white overcoat look with black trimmings and accents. It's really the one new attire change out of the four that's probably the smallest change in design overall. It's still very posh and very higher class, which definitely fits Weiss, but since Weiss's first attire was a snowy white dress, it's not that big of a switch. It still fits her though. Blake has had a big change with her look though. Sleek black trousers and boots, a belt too just underneath a bit more exposed midsection, and a white shirt now instead of her black top, though she still sports her tape for her weapons. It screams simple and yet effective, for one, and it's also very suiting for someone who's a bit secluded and yet also very agile when it comes to combat. Plus, while maybe black might have fit her part of the plan better, it's a look that doesn't make her stand out, which will help her objective that we'll see she has later on. Of course, Yang was shown in the trailer with her design before any of the others, but I'll still give it a quick run through. She has definitely got a major shift in her attire from the previous one. A golden shirt with a bit of a chest and bra showing, a black collar coat with some black tights, and boots to finish it all off. This design is actually the one I like the most out of the four, as it's very stylish and flashy, yet it also fits Yang's more exotic and expressive nature. Also, both now her and Blake both sport butt capes. And so the planning begins. Weiss and RWBY will go out and check the Schnee Dust Company records for any info regarding inconsistencies or dust robberies that there might be, while Blake will head to a White Fang faction meeting to see them handing out orders and recruiting new members. All the while Yang will be checking in on an old friend on the shady side of town who apparently knows everything going on in Vale and see what they can tell her. Chances are this old friend is Junior, so I hope he's wearing a cup this time. Ugh. The girls might want to take note from Jean though about chatting in secret at Beacon, since they're overheard by Sun, who freaks out Weiss thinking that he spies on them, and Neptune, who probably needs a hand right now. Sun wants in on stopping Torchwick, and I guess Neptune's just along for the ride, since he's sticking with the monkey boy. So now, despite the RWBY girls initially saying that they don't want to risk any friends, the boys are added to the team. Sun and Blake, as the resident faunists, will team up to go to the White Fang meeting, and RWBY plays shipper by denying Weiss some time with Neptune and shoving him towards Yang while yanking the Ice Queen away. Scene change now as we see Ruby and Weiss head into their new location, the Cross-Continental Transmit, which from Weiss's dialogue we find out was made by those in Atlas after the Great War, as a way for the four kingdoms, each with their own tower, to communicate to people across the world. This is a nice bit of world building as we see some more unique landmarks and locations of this world, and we see some more of Atlas's technical power with them making these things, not to mention the fact that the various kingdoms are linked in various ways like this and the Vital Festival. It just helps the world grow some more. A bit of butterfingers from Ruby and we see her scroll land in front of Penny, the mysterious young girl that the gang met at the end of the last volume, who disappeared into a limo shortly after kicking some major butt. Not surprisingly, Ruby is happy to see Penny again, wondering where on earth that she's been, and chases after Penny when she initially feigns ignorance, clearly trying to distance herself from the young girl before she does crack in the end and says that she'll open up. While this goes on, Weiss heads to the CCT in a walk that, while it does show us the insides of the building, and we see how it's run and all that, I think probably could have been cut a bit shorter just so it didn't drag as much. Though we do see that Weiss looks like she was practicing her smile on the elevator ride up. One shot of the various symbols of the kingdoms and a quick chat with the holographic attendant later, and Weiss calls up her father's company to grab the info that she wanted, and it's here that we see some interesting tidbits. Firstly, a big surprise is that it turns out that Weiss isn't an only child, as the woman working at the company mentions a sister by the name of Winter. That's a big surprise as it leads to a lot of questions regarding Weiss's past. How is she the heiress when there is another Schnee child? How did the difficult childhood that Weiss had from her father's reactions to the White Fang attacks affect Winter, if at all? It's clear that Weiss, after masking the hunt for the info under the guise of schoolwork, that she doesn't seem to be happy at the mention of her father and maybe her sister as well, given her unwillingness to speak with them and her forlorn look at the end of the call. There are some other questions though. Going by this and Weiss being familiar with the CCT and Atlas, this all but confirms that Weiss perhaps lived or came from there, due to it being the headquarters of the Schnee Dust Company and where her father works, so why would Weiss go to school at Beacon and not the school run by James Ironwood, given that that would be the closest school? Could she be trying to avoid Ironwood or maybe distance herself from her family? And the girl that Weiss was talking to didn't mention any mother at all, so what does that mean? Did she die or has she left? More for the future, I guess, as we're back with Ruby and Penny now, as the ginger girl reveals that her father, in her words, is very protective of her, and that someone else has told her not to speak with the others or anyone. We don't find out who though, as the two are distracted by Ironwood having a demonstration revealing the new combat androids called Elysian Knights that will patrol and be new forces of the Atlas army, along with a giant battlemech dubbed Freckles, the Elysian Paladin. Surely though this goes against what Osborn told Ironwood in the last episode, as Ironwood is showing off new forces to combat any threats, and doing so in Vale and not their home base of Atlas. It'll clearly cause some more issues between the two, and it's interesting that this has the Schnee Dust Company's backing and aiding in the creation of these forces, especially when the trailer hinted that these mechs might not be Atlas exclusive. The Atlas security notice Penny though, and thus the chase is on as Penny bolts off with Ruby in tow and the security guards following. Something of interest though here is we see that Ruby's semblance has a limit. She pushed off using her speed so hard that she kinda tuckers out. I never knew that semblance could be a tiring power to use, and whether or not this is just the case with Ruby or her just overexerting herself, this makes the whole semblance concept rather interesting, just trying to figure out how long it can last before the user runs tired. This time we see it end in almost a bad way as Ruby nearly got run down by a truck, which Penny blocks, the truck being driven by the owner of From Dusk Till Dawn, who I think probably rivals the Cabbage Man from the Avatar series in terms of unlucky breaks. Penny and Ruby manage to escape the Atlas soldiers, and after some cute hiccups from Penny as she lies, she finally trusts her friend Ruby with revealing her secret. That she is not a real girl.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Yeah, Penny being a robot isn't much a secret, and really the ending reveal for this episode is more for RWBY's sake than our own. Don't forget that RWBY did get struck hard by Torchwick before Penny's sword came out her back and jumped off far away into the battle, but yeah, as far as shock reveals goes, this was not surprising at all. Really, we just need confirmation on just what Penny truly is, though I suspect we'll get those details soon. With that said, let's go through the negatives and positives for the episode. And sadly, unlike last episode, I do have a bit more negatives this time out. Firstly, while I love the new attires for the girls, some of the animation around it has its issues, like clipping and some blocky body parts. I hope that the team wring out these issues as the volume goes on and they're more used to them, but yeah, some clipping arms and some clothing doing that as well, it does happen here or there. Also, with the background characters in this episode, there are a couple of doubles in the Atlas showcase, though that's more or less just on deeper analysis and probably not something you will notice first time out. And up close, like with after the truck crash, some of the models look rather rough, with some not even having mouth flaps when speaking. With regards to the plot, this was also a bit of a snag. Don't get me wrong, it's far from terrible, but some stuff like Jean's bit or Weiss walking in the CCT could have been trimmed down a bit. Plus, out of the 3 plans set in place, RWBY and Weiss had probably the easiest and yet also less exciting part of the plan. Weiss is connected to the Schnee company as the daughter of the boss, so it wasn't going to be hard to get the info. In fact, it may have been a bit too easy. It leads to some interesting stuff, yes, with regards to Weiss's past and her family, and we see some more of the world, but it wasn't that exciting, and the episode dragged longer than I think it needed, and could have easily been a bit shorter, with still having the same effect of getting all the information and some insight in Weiss's past just fine. I will give my one half of weekly voice acting props to Kara with her voice work here, as it's a lot tighter than Volume 1 up to this point. Saying that though, about the scene with the CCT dragging on a bit more than it needed, I think that's a lot of this episode's major fault. It just dragged a bit too much, and it really didn't pick up any pace. It just felt a bit slow. Whether it was the aforementioned CCT scene, or the minutes with Penny just keeping quiet and trying to avoid RWBY before she eventually spills, it just feels a bit too slow. Maybe if they had her running off at first from seeing RWBY and then chatting, it would have at least picked the pace up a bit more instead of it just being something at the end and really not coming to much. Especially with the fact that most of the humor was limited to earlier on in the episode, and just the action being limited to chase scenes. Positives are still here though. For one, as mentioned, I do appreciate the world building, and I do love the concept behind the CCT, and how it helps the kingdoms communicate and thus make them feel a bit more closer. Also, there has to be some praise for the character of Penny, who I found really adorable here with her struggles, her cute hiccups when she lies, sort of echoing Pinocchio, and I gotta give the other half of major props for voice acting to Taylor Pelto, the voice of Penny. She did a good job getting out that very confused and scared side of the mysterious girl, and they do make me care for her and curious into her creation, as well as the friendship with RWBY. And while the episode does have its issues with hinting a bit too much into the future and not having too much stuff really for now, I do like the fact that we got some interesting stuff in regards to Weiss. So, all in all, this was sadly a bit of a slip-up for me, as a viewer at least. It's not a terrible episode, as I said, don't get me wrong. It's hardly the worst episode in the series at all. But after 2 great episodes in this volume, this one is just kind of average in comparison, and so far not as strong. I hope with us possibly going into Yang or Blake's section of the plan next week, we'll have a raise of pace, writing, and interest, as for now, this week's episode was a minor hiccup in more than just the title. Do you agree though? Is this an excellent episode in your eyes, or do you think that I was being a bit too fair and you find it worse? Your opinions do interest me, so you're fine to comment in the section down below. Other than that though, that's it for this week. I will see you next week with the next episode. Till then, peace.